Hey fellow filmmakers, thank you guys for checking out my last review video. Today we're going to talk about the new Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Now, a lot of you guys have probably used the original Pocket or maybe avoided it due to things like the screen or the battery or any number of other issues that I personally haven't been crazy about. However, the new 4K version of the Pocket, which we have here, this guy, I gotta say, has blown my mind. First impressions. The very first thing I noticed, my fingers touched this thing, was that it's very plasticky. I gotta just straight up say that. It feels like a plastic product. It's good for rigging because it keeps it light. But if you're expecting something that you're like, oh, it's gonna be really impact resistant, all this different stuff, it's just not gonna be that. It's not gonna feel that way for you. But it really doesn't bother me because, you know, I put it in a cage, I rig my stuff out. For me, I'm not using it right out of the box as it is. I will say the fact that it looks like a DSLR is super, super cool. And I would definitely say that most people who see you carrying this around, unless they know about the product, unless they're filmmakers also, they're not even gonna know you're holding a cinema camera. They're gonna think that you're shooting with a DSLR and they'll probably just go, oh, there's some tourists, which is awesome for those of us who are doing documentary, for those of us who are doing any sort of guerrilla style shooting. It's fantastic. So in terms of the form factor, the fact that it looks like a DSLR, very cool. Anyone who's paying attention to Blackmagic news will actually see that they just released a battery grip for this, which makes it even more DSLR-ish, which is, in my opinion, only a win. The screen, big, beautiful 5-inch 1080p screen. The battery is a same as the 5D Mark III, which is good for me because I have 5D Mark IIIs, 7D Mark IIs. I mean, I have Canon cameras, so I have a ton of these LPE6 batteries. If you guys remember from the first Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera, those little batteries lasted about 15 minutes, which is, I mean, when you turn it on, you navigate menus, double check your settings, you're looking at maybe 10 or 12 minutes of record time. This guy lasts probably, I'd say, 45 minutes, maybe an hour if you're not doing crazy frame rates. It does have 12-volt input. They have their own weird little 2-pin push-pull locking connector thing. I don't know why they did that, but whatever. I'm just glad they have 12-volt input. 12-volt input really means 12 to 18 volts, so yes, you can plug it directly into an unregulated power source like a D-tap on a V-mount battery, and it will do the regulation for you. It doesn't have to be exactly 12 volt. You won't damage a camera plugging it into a higher voltage battery. And there are companies that make adapters that allow you to actually get that sort of proprietary 2-pin locking connector out to a DC barrel. Now, the coolest part to me about this, and it's a feature that I have not seen Blackmagic mess with since their original 2.5K cinema camera, is while you are running external power, it will actually charge the internal battery while you're using it. So you can actually run the internal battery till it's dead, plug in external power, run that till it's dead, and the camera won't shut off. I will literally hook a battery on my waistband, run a cable up to the camera. Whenever I need to put the camera down, I just unplug, but I don't turn it off because it's gonna run just fine for an hour. So when I'm shooting, plug back in and go. When I'm ready to set it down and have a conversation, just unplug and set it down. And I have the power pack on my waist all day. It may sound a little goofy, but it works better than you'd think. The fact that you can run up to a 2 terabyte SSD directly after the USB-C that provides power to the SSD as well, it's awesome. I mean, it's literally why I made the Attic C2S, was to help people get into the space where SSDs live, and professional SSDs cost less than CFast cards. I'm so glad to see Blackmagic finally getting on, just embracing direct to SSD recording right out of the camera, no modification needed. This was what I wanted in the first place as a filmmaker. I wanted this ability to go straight to SSDs. So moving up the side here, we have our video out is a full-size HDMI. Thank you. It's so nice to have just the same HDMI cord you would use for a computer or a laptop or whatever, straight from camera, full-size, straight to your external monitor or your wireless kit or whatever have you. No adapters needed. It is fantastic. To have a little camera like this with a full-size HDMI, it's a godsend. So happy. And moving on up, we have our headphone jack and another microphone input. Now the really cool thing, it turns out you can actually run a timecode generator directly into this microphone port, and the camera will pick up that is timecode, and it will jam sync to your external timecode generator. You can actually hijack that port to make it a timecode input, which makes it a very professional camera to use on sets in that kind of environment. And for me, ever since moving to timecode, if you guys haven't used it, use it at least once. Run timecode to your audio, run timecode to your camera, open DaVinci Resolve, and tell it to auto sync based on timecode, you will be shocked at how much time it saves you in post. No syncing, everything auto links, it snaps together. When you drag your file onto your timeline, it already has every audio track you recorded attached as though it was recorded in the video in the first place. It is the coolest feature ever. I can't go back, and you guys should also get spoiled, so try it. Now, let's talk about the mount. One thing I do really like about Micro Four Thirds, because of the flange depth, you can actually have an adapter that gives you an ND wheel, or you can put in an adapter that gives you a focal reducer like the Metabones. Okay guys, dual native ISO. The camera's two native ISO sensitivities are 400 and 3200. It's effectively shooting at one of those two ISOs at all times, and every other ISO you shoot at is a digital gain or a digital pull from that native. And where that transition happens on this camera is at 1250. Frame rate options. So you can get 4K 60, which is cool. You can get 1080p 120, which is cropped. And on a Micro Four Thirds sensor, when you do a 1080 crop on a small Micro Four Thirds sensor already, I'm sure you can imagine just how tightly you're punching in on your optics, how much you lose your depth of field, or you lose your wide angle view. But again, with things like the Metabones, to combat that and to give you the extra light that you need when you're shooting, and the dual native ISO to give you the extra light that you need when you're shooting super slow-mo 120, it actually gives you a super usable image that doesn't need to be like rescued by a colorist in post. You can actually have good data as a starting point so a colorist can give you a spectacular image by the end of it. There's another video on my YouTube channel that shows all of the slow motion nonsense I've been shooting around my yard, lizards, tree branches, etc. So you can see the kind of quality I'm talking about when this thing shoots 120 frames a second slow-mo. It doesn't feel like a little punched in nugget in the middle of the sensor. It feels like a cinematic image thanks to the tools like dual native, like a Metabones, that give you an effectively larger sensor size, that give you an effectively higher sensitivity sensor. For guerrilla filmmakers, this is a spectacular camera. Everything I love about shooting with the 5D Mark III, everything I really loved about the original 2.5K, everything about the batteries and the SSDs and the monitor and internal recording, and it looks like a DSLR, it's awesome. And you know, in terms of my final thoughts, a camera like this at this price point is absolutely, utterly disruptive to the DSLR market. Canon, Sony, Panasonic, I know you guys may have your brand loyalty, you may have your favorite tool or feature that one camera has over another, and they're great, and whatever you need for you, that's fantastic. But when you're talking raw image quality, raw power, raw settings options, and I mean raw, 12-bit raw internal recording, cinema gradable footage, there isn't a camera that produces a quality image like this anywhere near this price point. And anyone who is a Blackmagic fan, I don't need to convince you of anything. Anyone who's on the fence between this and some other cameras, go watch some other reviews, do additional research, don't take my word for it. Of course, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. You know, this is not going to be a camera that will replace the Ursa Mini. It certainly doesn't compete directly with the Ursa Mini Pro G2. But for my inventory, I fully intend to have this and the Ursa Mini Pro G2, and they will shoot alongside each other.